What is going on, everybody? I am TheOmniPuss and I will be your host, bringing you today my top 10 anime films of all time. If this just randomly popped up in your subscription feed, you're probably wondering, who is this guy again and why am I subscribed to him? Or isn't he a Let's Player? Why is he talking about anime? For all of those questions and more channel related stuff, just go towards this time, which is towards the end of the video, as I would rather skip ahead towards the actual topic at hand. Anime. I freaking love it. Films. I freaking love those. Anime films, they're really one of the best examples of what anime as a medium has to offer, because they have higher budgets, but shorter durations than your average series. So you get to have a much more effective distribution of the budget, leading to higher production values and effectively some of the most stunning animation and usually engaging narratives put to film. Of course, some of these you are probably well aware of because, they're pretty mainstream. Some of them because, they're mainstream because they're good. Some you might not have heard of because either they're more underrated or perhaps they're a little bit older and you won't be aware of them unless you're, into anime. Now, laying down some rules, for this video because those are important. I'm sticking it to one film per director or series because I don't want things to get repetitive. I want variety in this list. And for the same reason, do not expect films from major shonen, there won't be any Naruto or Dragon Ball or Bleach films in this list because, first of all, to be fair, they probably wouldn't make it anyways, but for the main reason is they're the most popular shows in anime, like everyone is well aware of them, so there's really no point in discussing them further. Of course, last but not least, this is my top 10, it's just my own opinion, so it's totally subjective. And if you disagree with it, by all means, post your own top 10 in the comments. It'd be awesome to have some sort of discussion there. So let's get started. Kicking off the list with a bang, Cowboy Bebop Knocking on Heaven's Door manages to encompass everything that made the original series an industry landmark. It's that stellar mix of charismatic characters and diverse adventures, presented with more style and grace than pretty much anything made since that define it. Bebop was originally conceptualized as a film, and throughout its run, Watanabe designed each episode as standalone short films of sorts. As such, the creation of a feature-length project was not only natural, but ideal for transmitting the show's vision. Set in between episodes 22 and 23 of the show, the plot revolves around the, familiar to fans, Bebop crew, composed by Spike Spiegel, Jet Black, Faye Valentine, Ed, and Ein, trying to bring down a terrorist that plans on releasing a deadly pathogen and kill thousands in the process. It is a superficially simple story, but, cliché as it sounds, it's the journey that truly matters, and this one is engaging in its entirety due to solid pacing. Since the film is the last work related to the series, I believe that fans wanted nothing more from it than one final adventure with a set of great characters they've come to love, and the film delivers perfectly on that, showcasing a more vulnerable side of the crew while still featuring the show's typical humor and sense of fun. It's also an audio-visual treat, featuring more detailed animation than the show's, which was already fantastic to begin with, as well as live-action styled cinematography that, coupled with brilliant choreography for battles, lead to some of the best fighting scenes in anime. On top of that, the iconic Yoko Kanno returns as composer and, through mixing all sorts of influences and genres, be it orchestral, rock, jazz, metal, etc., delivers a beautiful score that really elevates the whole project. What's great about Knocking on Heaven's Door is how it feels just like an extended episode of the main series. Rather than presenting a bittersweet farewell, it's an ode to the show, and one that everyone should experience. When discussing anime, Akira is bound to come up. Credited as one of the major driving forces for making anime popular in the West, it still stands as an obligatory watch for any and all fans of the medium. In 1988, coincidentally the film's release date, Tokyo is obliterated, leading to World War III, and 30 years later, Neo-Tokyo offers a dystopian take on human society. Now, the film is rather thematically broad, but mainly focuses on Kaneda, the delinquent leader of a biker gang, and his friend Tetsuo. After nearly crashing his bike into a strange-looking child named Takashi, who we later discover was a runaway with psychic powers, Tetsuo is hospitalized and monitored by the government. Soon, he awakens similar psychic abilities which he is unable to control, and chaos ensues. In a way though, the star of the film is Neo-Tokyo itself, with the cyberpunk city showcasing a kaleidoscope of diversity, ranging from the chaos-fueled biker gangs to the religiously obsessed fanatics and every weirdo in between. On the presentation front, the film's legendary for a good reason. Released over 25 years ago and still packing more detail and fluidity in its animation than stuff being released nowadays, Akira is visually incredible, and the soundtrack doesn't fall short, offering an ominous and choir-heavy, almost tribal score. Now, to be fair, one could criticize the film for its lack of coherence, and blame it on the fact that it was created before the manga it's based on was finished, leading to a shortened narrative in the process, but ultimately, Akira was never meant to deliver a linear story, leaving plenty of elements up for interpretation, and purposely not pandering to viewers, which, if you ask me, only makes it that much more enticing. The quintessential anime space epic, Legend of the Galactic Heroes as a franchise stands as the very definition of a classic, breaking new ground in scale, narrative development, and execution, still unmatched to this day in a lot of scenarios. My Conquest is a Sea of Stars is one of the prequel films to the main series, working as a perfect gateway for that, and it manages to deliver everything that makes it so iconic. The series is set in the distant future, during the war that's been going on for hundreds of years over dominance of human society between the Galactic Empire and the Freedom Planets Alliance. It is a case of autocracy versus democracy, each side being guided by our protagonists. On the Empire side of things, we have the incredibly charismatic Reinhard von Lohengram, a young military genius and political ideologist who intends to make the universe his. The Alliance, however, features Yang Wen Li, an equally astute tactician but who would much rather be free to retire and spend a life of leisure. Ultimately, although very different individuals, they both share the desire to end the war, unlike their superiors who would rather propagate it for personal, political, and economic benefits. All characters always manage to feel like actual individuals with established personalities and contributing something to the plot, all sharing a sense of mutual respect, something which is always great to see. As a prequel film to a series that's over 100 episodes long, there's too much to cover in this video, but really, in a lot of ways, Legend of the Galactic Heroes is the polar opposite of something like Star Wars. Whereas that franchise portrays black and white scenarios, being a classic tale of good versus evil and focusing on the individual strength of a warrior, this series is much more grounded on reality, developing both sides of war as equals, both as morally grey factions without ever favoring an ideology or political system over the other, showcasing their pros and cons effectively. This is also seen in the way it approaches battles and the tactics involved, which is the real meat of the series. Don't expect these characters to be the Light from Death Note or Lelouch from Code Geass, characters that, although great in their own ways, would be way too cartoony for the tone of this series, which favors the power of each fleet as an union of all of its members rather than relying on individual prowess, but never neglecting the tactical brilliance of Reinhard or Young. Although the film hasn't aged particularly well from a presentation standpoint, its artistic sense and triumphant orchestral score, relying heavily on classical pieces, definitely make up for it, and honestly, if you're a fan of space epics, you're probably aware you're doing yourself a major disservice if you don't see this one. The beauty of Wolf Children is the way it tells a very humane story through a set of fantastical conditions. It's something seen on all of Osoda's works, and as far as I'm concerned, this one stands as his best project so far. The film focuses on Hana, a college student who falls in love with a werewolf and their children, who possess the same ability, showcasing how they adjust to the world due to their rather unique situation, exploring whether they should follow the path of a human or a wolf. What may initially seem like a dubious scenario is really just a fantasy layer to cover a story about growing up, coming to terms with oneself, how one adheres to a surrounding society, and all of the challenges and sacrifices involved in doing so. In spite of focusing on a few different aspects, I feel it did a great job integrating them all and transitioning between them, leading to me loving every minute of it. It is a beautiful film with great scene composition and an emphasis on the environments and backdrops, with a couple of scenes of brilliantly animated eye candy. Sound-wise, it is accompanied by an incredible score that mainly resorts to orchestral tracks, occasionally backed by tranquil vocals, evoking an almost maternal feeling, and it really hits on all levels, portraying pure calm, melancholy, or joy accordingly, mirror the emotions and tone of the scenes masterfully. All in all, it is a deeply personal family story, but also a universal one, being incredibly relatable and worth seeing because of it. Kara no Kyoukai, also known as The Garden of Sinners, is a film series set in the Nasuverse, the Type Moon universe shared by other works such as the Fate series, and as such, the fifth Kara no Kyoukai film, Paradox Spiral, comes with my endorsement under the assumption that you have experienced the previous films, as they are necessary to fully grasp its narrative and characters. There's simply too much information to process without knowledge of the rest of the series, and ideally general information of the Nasuverse itself. The series follows protagonist Shiki Ryogi. Now, Shiki's one of my favorite characters across any medium, because she has so many layers. She is an anti-hero that suffers from dissociative identity disorder. On the one hand, she has a dominant female personality, someone that feels the urge to kill as a way of making herself feel alive but fails in doing so. Opposing that is her male personality, being an animalistic killer responsible for her destructive impulses. And last but not least, a third personality that, unlike the previous two that stem from the mind, is the incarnation of her physical self, the gap between her male and female personalities, and an entity that can be defined as a manifestation of the void. Shiki is an incredible, bizarre character to witness, as someone you're cheering on as the ultimate badass while being fully aware of how mentally broken she is. In Paradox Spiral, series antagonist Sora Naraya intends to use Shiki as a means of reaching Akasha, a metaphysical location seen as the origin of everything, a void where all souls stem from. Soren is a villain just as complex as Shiki, a tragic monk that fell into depression upon being unable to save the lives of those surrounding him, and decided to focus his life on understanding the pointless nature of life and death, believing he can achieve that by reaching Akasha. The film is an audio-visual masterpiece, from the dark and twisted urban landscapes to the character designs and all of the visual splendor you're constantly bombarded with. Being animated by Ufotable, this is hardly surprising, but Kara no Kyoukai still stands as some of their best work ever, which is saying a lot. Coupling the eye-melting visuals, the score is composed by none other than Yuki Kajura, and while I could leave it at that, I will say that it's arguably my favorite work of hers, blending genres masterfully to deliver a truly powerful soundtrack. Now, a necessary word of warning to the faint of heart: this series is incredibly violent, never shying away from mature themes that are portraying them in equally brutal way, so, you have been warned. Regardless, Kara no Kyoukai is the sort of series that motivates you to go research it once you finish seeing it, due to its themes, symbolism, and the way it is presented, and Paradox Spiral stands as arguably the most cryptic, but also more spectacular of the bunch. Like virtually all of Miyazaki's works, Spirited Away is a truly magical film. Unlike many, I can't say that I have any childhood memories associated to it. I was 6 when it came out, but I only saw it in late 2013, around the time I started properly getting into anime. But the effect, I can assure you, was just as powerful. Following the journey of Chihiro through the spirit world in a quest to save her parents, the film is mainly a coming-of-age story, utilizing a physical journey and location as counterparts to Chihiro's psychological development, not unlike Alice in Wonderland. It also touches on environmental issues as well as finding a balance between traditional cultural elements and progress. But in spite of dealing with these themes, it's a very accessible film, being originally designed as a source of inspiration for young girls. What always strikes me about Spirited Away is its atmosphere and world building, arguably my favorite in any film ever, presented in a manner only Studio Ghibli could. The visuals are undeniably gorgeous, with terrific cinematography and stunning art, be it the lush environments or the unique character designs, all centered on Japanese folklore, with animation that exceeds most stuff being released almost 15 years afterwards, and with an art style that's every bit as whimsical as it is awe-inspiring. The music is also some of the best ever made for anything really, composed by Joe Hisaishi, a regular for Ghibli films, relying on orchestral tracks that perfectly complement the narrative. The train sequence alone is one of my favorite scenes ever made, with its incredible vistas, melancholic track, and symbolism as a crucial step in Chihiro's rite of passage. It's a film that is, at its core, an archetypal story about growing up, but it illustrates its message in a way no other film has, standing as a true modern classic. Paprika showcases a world where, through the use of a new neurological device, one is able to directly interact with a subject's dreams, a process known as dream therapy. However, once the dreams start having an effect on the real world, things start getting, let's just go with, weird. Now, if you're familiar with Kon's works, you know that they all deal heavily with surrealism, but through its bizarre dreamscapes, Paprika pushes the envelope the farthest, to a degree where, at a point, the barrier between reality and dreams is literally non-existent. It is a film that explores internal duality and the fluidity of the human mind, fetching deep into the nature of dreams, and it does so terrifically. For establishing purposes, it is widely regarded that, much like Kon's Perfect Blue was a major source of inspiration for Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, Paprika fueled Christopher Nolan's vision for Inception, so it comes heavily recommended for fans of that film. On the presentation front, Paprika is up there as one of the most audio-visually spectacular things I've had the pleasure of experiencing. The animation is both incredibly detailed and fluid, but the artistic sense is what makes it truly stand out, with a mandatory reference to the sensory overload that are the dreamscape parades and everything that accompanies them. Not only that, Kon is a well-known master of editing, constantly innovating on transitioning between sequences, and this film is one of its greatest examples. Accompanying the film's visual splendor, we have a beautifully haunting score that, through its distorted electronic and rock elements, as well as being the first film to incorporate Vocaloid for some vocals, match the chaotic nature of the scenarios explored. As with all of Kon's works, it is impossible to express how and why Paprika is so amazing without proper analysis, but if you haven't seen it already, I urge you to do so, as it is really one of anime's biggest achievements. While some may dismiss the notion of having an animation as your favorite war film of all time, others have seen Griff of the Fireflies. Set in Japan as an extended flashback of the final months of World War II, the story follows the lives of 14-year-old Seita and his 4-year-old sister Setsuko as they endure the struggles of war. One of the most curious aspects of the film is how it is thematically interpreted by Western and Japanese audiences. In the West, it's seen as an anti-war film, offering an intimate perspective of war by focusing on the personal tragedies of its victims instead of glorifying it. However, in Japan, following Takahata's original message, the film intends to make young people respect and honor their elders due to the sacrifices that had to be made during this period. Regardless of its intended message, what makes Griff of the Fireflies unique is its characters and how human they feel, making all scenarios that much more impactful. According to Takahata, people tend to feel inferior after seeing war films due to the heroic way in which the characters are often handled. As such, a focus on creating a realistic portrayal of humanity amidst the brutality of war was necessary so that the audience could relate with its narrative. War through a child's eyes is by itself a devastating concept, and the film explores that in a masterful way, featuring moments of gut-wrenching sadness, but also scenes where these kids are just trying to enjoy their lives in spite of their circumstances. In spite of being somewhat outdated from a fluidity point of view, the animation still delivers some incredible scenes, particularly the iconic one with the Fireflies, and as with most Ghibli films, it's incredibly detailed, paying massive attention to the tiniest of human interactions, perfectly illustrated when dealing with Setsuko and her own characteristic movements as the small child she is. It's the addition of these details, coupled with the aforementioned writing, that make these characters come alive, making each moment that much more real. The score is also great, encompassing the full range of emotions the film produces through beautiful instrumentals. Ultimately, Griff of the Fireflies is not a film you have fun seeing, but it is an unforgettable experience and a real testament that animation is a medium capable of delivering tales of any genre. It is a true masterpiece and a mandatory watch for anime and film lovers alike. The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya is a curious film. On the one hand, tone-wise, it's not at all like the series that precedes it, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, but in doing so, it is my favorite element of the franchise. This isn't to say that I don't love the original show, but its tone just wouldn't fit this film's narrative. For those unaware, the original series focuses on the wacky adventures of the SOS Brigade, a high school club composed of Haruhi Suzumiya, Kyon, Yuki Nagato, Mikuru Asahina, and Itsuki Koizumi. Now, the point of the OS Brigade is to crack cases and unravel mysteries, but in reality its main objective is keeping Haruhi entertained because, and this detail is rather important, she is, without being aware of it, effectively God. Yes, Haruhi has reality warping powers of the highest degree, and the general consensus is that, were she aware of it, she could accidentally erase or remake the universe, so the brigade makes sure she's always content, just in case. In this film, however, as implied by its name, Haruhi Suzumiya is nowhere to be found, and Kyon, who throughout the entire series is constantly complaining about the things he's put through because of her, is now at a complete loss. On top of that, excluding him of course, everyone's memories have been wiped clean. It is as if Haruhi and effectively the SOS Brigade and everything they've gone through have never existed. Upon realizing this, Kyon decides to do something. He wants things to go back to how they were, and this does wonders for his character. There are several moments, pivotal ones, throughout this film where he is given the opportunity to stay in this new scenario, one where things are normal and he can live a normal life, which he was always asking for in the series, and yet he pushes on in order to get back to Haruhi. You get to see him at his most vulnerable state and what drives him to return. Besides Kyon, Yuki Nagato also gets massive character development, showcasing her human persona instead of the impenetrable alien one presented in the series. The film is still to this day the best work KyoAni has ever made in my opinion, and the presentation just adds to that, featuring some of their best produced animation and a score that, much like the film, is so different from what the show originally brought us. Whereas the series focused on campy tracks appropriate for the zany adventures the characters go through, the film follows a much more emotional route, relying on orchestral and classical pieces to convey the melancholy, no pun intended, and eventual catharsis that Kyon experiences throughout the film. It's definitely the sort of thing that you'll appreciate a whole lot more if you're a fan of the series, but fact of the matter is, The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya is one of anime's most incredible films, taking viewers on a gripping journey they'll never forget. Now, before going into the #1 slot, it is time for those honorable mentions. Films that are great, seriously, without a doubt worth checking out, but for whatever reason just didn't make into my top 10. So, starting off. Anything by Studio Ghibli. That's 20 of the most charming films ever made right there, so it should take you a while. Anything by Makoto Shinkai, a director that emphasizes on understated romantic relationships and whose films are virtually unmatched in animation quality. Anything by Mamoru Hosoda, as someone that manages to perfectly capture the essence of family and human interactions, showcasing deeply personal stories backed by fantastical scenarios. The rebuild of Evangelion series as the more accessible and action-packed counterpart of the iconic anime. Trigun Badlands Rumble. Much like Cowboy Bebop's film, this is basically an extended episode of Trigun, and since that's one of my favorite shows ever, the film is pretty damn great too. Jinro the Wolf Brigade, a rather gritty film about predators in society focusing on secret elite troops, treason, and Red Riding Hood metaphors. Sword of the Stranger, just a damn solid samurai film with great battle choreography and a sweet-ass presentation. Redline, one of the most impressive animation projects ever created. It was 7 years in development and it'll make your eyes melt with its stylized racing awesomeness because of it. And last but not least, Ghost in the Shell, the sci-fi classic that inspired works like The Matrix, still stands as one of anime's most gripping settings, and Major Kusanagi's still a total badass. I am a diehard Eva fan, just getting that out of the way. Now, as most are well aware, Neon Genesis Evangelion is one of the most influential but controversial series in anime history, particularly due to its 2 final episodes not corresponding to fan expectation, alienating plenty in the process. This is something that's been discussed ad nauseum, so I'll try not to dabble in it too much. However, without this backlash, it's unlikely this film would have been released, as it was created as a means of replacing the show's conclusion in order to offer a more satisfying ending. It's debatable how successful it was in doing so, leading in many aspects to more questions than answers, but simultaneously, it is responsible for expanding the show's cultural impact with an onslaught of individuals still to this day discussing and analyzing every minute detail presented. From the get-go, presentation-wise, the end of Evangelion is a masterstroke, featuring great animation, fantastic scene composition with plenty of shots mirroring others as narrative parallels, and an artistic sense to match. Couple that with Shiro Sagisu's memorable score and you have a treat for the senses. As a deconstruction of the mecha genre, strongly twisting all of its tropes, Evangelion, more than any of the previously mentioned works, is the sort of series that demands multiple viewings and stimulates a desire to research everything about it. It sparks proper analysis, something I shan't do here as I would be doing it a disservice, but there is no lack of resources online that delve into all of the thematic and symbolic nuances that the show, and especially this film, present. No, instead I will focus on a more personal perspective. This is my list after all, and it isn't easy justifying a number 1 without relying on subjectivity, since I can't factually pinpoint why The End of Evangelion is my favorite anime film of all time, but it remains so. It is well established that Evangelion mirrors the mental state of its creator, Hideaki Anno, during development, a man who has struggled with depression throughout his whole life. And although fortunately I can't relate to that personally, it is a fascinating project to behold. One of the show's biggest achievements is its cast, since Ava's characters are some of the best ever written as far as I'm concerned. Some, particularly series protagonist Shinji, are commonly seen as weaklings, defying the archetypal hero, but people tend to ignore his circumstances and the stuff he has to endure. This is a 14-year-old kid that suffers from deep social and separation anxiety, someone who has never felt love and at one point is commanded by his neglecting father, the main root of his insecurities, into murdering the one individual he truly cared for. Shinji is a broken individual, and because of it, he is eventually responsible for beginning the apocalypse after losing all hope in humanity. Again, I cannot overstate how messed up these characters are, and they all have their own psychological traumas, being in many cases attracted by the notion of the void, a topic that, alongside sexuality, composes in many ways the foundation of Evangelion. Sex and death, the ultimate representations of union and separation respectively. On top of this, the film also offers some of my favorite scenes across any and all mediums, namely Asuka's battle with the mass-produced Avas, accompanied by Bach's classical piece, Air on the G-string, and of course, the film's climax, the third impact, showing the world's end and the unification of all souls into a single entity, a moment joined by the iconic and stunning Comme sous Surtot, the upbeat track whose lyrics tragically mirror Shinji's inner thoughts after he sentences humanity's fate. Evangelion is not for everyone. It's also not a flawless show, and this isn't a flawless film, but I disagree with defining greatness by a lack of flaws. Rather, I see it as an amalgamation of its qualities. In Ava's case, it's the impact it had, the achievement it was, and how far it pushed things. On all notes, Evangelion is noteworthy. As previously mentioned, it's an entity that's over 15 years old and manages to still be a constant topic among anime fans, speculating on its meanings and messages, and that just goes to prove its greatness. Ultimately, The End of Evangelion is my favorite anime film of all time because it's the only one that's more than just a film. It is a full-blown experience, and one that I never get tired of revisiting. And that's my list! Hopefully you agree with some of them, disagree with others, get a discussion going in the comments, that'd be nice. Now, speaking of the channel stuff, if you are indeed interested in that, does this mean I'm going back to regularly uploading any sort of content, really, you know, be it Let's Plays or this sort of more editing heavy sort of stuff? Not really. Throughout the regular semester, I just do not have the time or resources to spend on such a thing. However, I can say that I am always interested in doing these sort of video projects. I love doing them, I really do. They're a blast to do. Every once in a while, if I have some free time, again, it's probably going to be more around the holidays and that sort of stuff, I will try to get like one of these out, mainly so I don't get rusty. And you know, that's basically why I did this video. I just wanted to produce something. Like, at the end of the day, even though I've been on a hiatus for over a year, I am a content creator at heart. Like, I feel the need to create content for others, and you know, that's basically it. So if you want to be kept up to date with what I'm doing, my thoughts on anime, games, films, whatever, you know, you can just follow me on Twitter. That's by far where I'm most active. So hopefully you have enjoyed this video. I cannot really promise when a new one will come out, but hopefully this one will keep you happy for a while. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you eventually.